We're live. Everything's set up. Amazing. Hey everybody, welcome to Moving from Surviving to Living. My name is Chani. I'm a personal development coach, and I'm really excited you guys are all here today. So, who remembers their New Year's resolution? You didn't make it. Okay. Okay. Did anybody? Who remembers what they did for New Year's? You remember?
Oh, yeah, sure.
You're at the show? You see how long it took us to remember what we did on New Year's? And it seems like you guys didn't really make resolutions. But for the people who did make resolutions, it probably would have looked very similar. Oh yeah, I think I was going to lose weight, stuff like that. And it's only been about a month and a half since then. So what happens is we oftentimes get an inspiration or a push to do something, and then it just falls through the cracks. So let's try to use today to find a way to break that pattern of behavior, that pattern of making commitments to things, or even if we don't commit to it, but desiring it and taking action towards something and then letting it slip through the cracks. Let's learn how we can change the patterns that we've been are really ingrained in us, and start changing our lives from a place of survival mode to living. Find your process. The process of moving from surviving to living involves connection, freedom, purpose, and fulfillment. Connection is the core, really, it's the core of our existence. We're hardwired for connection. And oftentimes our patterns of survival skills, which I'm going to explain later on what survival skills are, they keep us in disconnection. And we're seeking connection, but what we're doing is actually causing us disconnection. Disconnection from our family, disconnection from our friends, and disconnection from God or anything else that we're seeking to be united and connected with. Freedom. Freedom is one of my favorite parts of the process. Freedom is the opposite of control. Oftentimes, we think that freedom might mean I can travel the world freely with unlimited money. I don't know if you guys get these ads on your Instagram feeds or in Facebook feeds where someone is like, I'm traveling the world and I work from my laptop and I'm making $100 million a year, and they're selling you on freedom because we don't want that feeling of freedom. That's exactly the opposite of freedom. Freedom isn't this fantasy that doesn't really exist. It could be that person worked something out for himself, but freedom takes place in reality. Freedom takes place when we're not trying to control the outcome of something, but rather we're trying to focus on reality and accepting reality for what it is. Freedom for that person who's teaching you how to make $100,000 every month while he's in Bali, he is basically selling you on, you can have this and run from your problems and then you'll feel better. We'll be able to build the life we want for ourselves, which could look like making a lot of money and living in Bali, but that will only happen when we accept our reality and we can make a practical process of how to get from where we are, dealing with the emotions that come up in our present reality, and then working with alignment with ourselves, with other people, which means accepting other people. That's how we can become in alignment with another person, by accepting them for who they are and everything that they are. And then we're going to find that we feel this breath of fresh air, this freedom that's going to seep into our lives. Next is purpose. Purpose is found in our values. When we live into our values, that's when we're going to get that feeling of purpose. And I'm going to actually talk a lot about that today and how to find your values and what that practically looks like in reality, so that we're able to be more focused on leaning into our values. That's going to end up giving us more freedom and connection in our life because we're being genuine to ourselves and living in alignment. And then lastly is fulfillment. Fulfillment for me, I define it as the combination of freedom, freedom, connection, and purpose. That's when we get fulfillment. When our connection, our freedom, and purpose are all in alignment, that's when we get that feeling of, this is so fulfilling. Right. So this is a 3-step process to move from surviving to living. And I call this start living, because once we move from surviving, now we're just living. The first is to understand the problem. what's holding us where we are? How come we're stuck? Next part is, what's the solution? We need to learn the solution. Oftentimes, we think we know what the problem is, and then we use the intensity from our state of being in the problem, and we say, I'm going to shape my dreams, or I'm going to add more intensity so that I can have the life that I want, which usually is calmness. And we want tranquility, we want calm. There also can be excitement within it, but we try to add intensity to get there, and that's not how we get there. We need to take a step back and learn what it is, and then really create a new way of life, which is living in the solution after we've learned it and understood it. That process of learning the solution is a process of slowing down and really perceiving and taking in the answer to our problem. The problem. Who would like to read this? It's legible. She was just so excited.
Feel stuck in one or more area of your life. Keep trying harder to get unstuck and it's not working. Eventually, you find yourself worked out and feeling not fulfilled. Life begins to feel imbalanced and stressful. Desperate desire for connection and freedom, but you don't know where you should find it. Stuck.
Who here can relate to that? The coaches can relate. There's this feeling of being stuck that I'm assuming everybody here has felt stuck. Yes. When we feel stuck, what we try to do to get unstuck is we try harder. And there's this phrase, be the hardest working person in the room, and that's how you can become successful. I don't disagree with it, but I think that we also need to remember that we need to work smart, not hard. Because when we're trying to just add more energy, we're going to burn ourselves out. And there's a place for working hard, and there's also a place for working smart. And this is not an example of working smart. This is us in survival mode, running and trying so desperately to get what it is that we're looking for, that sense of connection, that fulfillment, the purpose in our life. And it's this process that just, it kind of keeps going in circles, and we feel really shitty when we're in that cycle. This here is a video of how we got into survival mode, where it all began, and I'll explain afterwards. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the movie Mulan, in this scene, what she's doing is she gets the news that her father has to go to the army and he's not physically well. So what she does is she's very scared he's going to die. So she cuts her hair, becomes a man, dresses as a man, takes his horse and goes off. So now he's not able to go to the army and she's going to take his name and pretend to be him. How does this enable a person to go into survival mode? The intense fear that she's going to lose her father and he's going to die in the army caused her to go into this intense survival mode where she's picking up, pretending she can get killed herself for pretending to be her father. And if she gets caught that she's not a man in the army, they're going to kill her. And that doesn't matter. The fact that the risk is very high, she's in survival mode and she's going to go for it. In this case, it does protect her. She ends up okay in the end. But then the question is how does an experience like this in our adolescenthood or even adulthood or childhood, how does this affect us down the road later in life? Oftentimes our survival skills help us in life, but then when we get to having relationships and building connection with other people, it disconnects us. And in this case, it helps her get to the army, but if she wants to build a relationship with somebody, and she's going to use the same skills of, I'm going to pretend to be somebody who I'm not to protect me and protect my family, then it's only going to cause her disconnection between her and another person. So what we do is we continue that cycle of being not true to ourselves in an effort to connect with other people and to protect ourselves and to feel okay. In an intense situation, it may work, but when we need to build relationships, it does not. Who wants to read this? He already went. So now we need somebody else. You'll go? Okay. I love this so much, and thank you for reading that. We mistake who we are for our survival skills when we get so used to a certain pattern of behavior that's keeping us safe. We begin to say this is who we are. If a person is, let's say, really good at convincing people of things, perhaps they're manipulative and how to manipulate so that they could stay alive and the risk was dying if they didn't learn how to be manipulative. And they'll say, yeah, I'm really good at convincing people. That's who I am. Is that who they are, or is that a skill that they developed so that they could survive? But really, their soul is a nice person, it's a caring person. Perhaps they're a very sweet, nurturing person. Maybe they're a very strong person. But when we have skills that we learn in life, for good or for worse, and we take it on and believe this is who I am, we're really judging ourselves. And what's not good about this is that we end up being not compassionate to ourselves. When times get tough and we need to be able to tell ourselves, you're doing the best you can, and to really be there for ourselves and hold ourselves, we're not able to, because what we're used to telling ourselves is, you're not trying hard enough, try harder, you're not doing this good enough, you're not going to survive unless you work harder, unless you hustle. And as we were saying before, we try to add intensity to get to a place of safety or calm, but it only will get us to more intensity and less calm. So when we begin to give ourselves compassion and really own our story, this is what I went through, and there's a separation between the skills I've developed to survive and who I am, who my soul is, that's when our healing will begin. What happened? So now we know what survival mode is and how we got there. What was happening inside of us during this whole process? Can I get someone to read this?
What happened? We went through some rough stuff, developed survival skills, going to survive, using survival skills to develop childhood.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate you reading. So really what it all comes down to is we didn't feel we had enough love and our needs were not being met. As children, our caretakers, our parents or our other caretakers did not necessarily meet our needs in the way that we needed. Now, it's not necessarily their fault either, because I believe they probably were trying their best with the tools that they had at the time, which for some people may have looked like not many tools and skills, and for other people, their parents may have had more. But the experience, nonetheless, leaving out judgment of if the parent was good or bad, just looking at the situation and accepting it as it was, the child's needs were not being met. And when they feel that their needs are not getting met, it puts them in the throes of survival mode. And the same thing with not getting enough love. When that child, the little child inside of everybody here, did not get the love they needed, if you guys experienced that, that's a very, very traumatizing experience for a child. And again, will put them in the throes of survival mode because they didn't have the tools to handle it. They didn't know how to survive. They didn't know how to cope. And there's a very big difference between coping mechanisms and survival techniques. The solution. Here is the solution, which I just alluded to. Can I have a volunteer to read this one? Thanks, Michelle.
We need to develop coping mechanisms in a practical way of life with values, acceptance, and providing skills.
So what we're looking at, thanks for reading that, Nicole, is we're learning how to have coping mechanisms instead of survival skills. And we're going to use that to build relationships. And oftentimes people say, I'm working on myself. What does that really mean, I'm working on myself? You got like a hammer working on yourself? The way I see it is we're looking at starting or building or crafting a new way of life. The way that we were living before, the way we perceived reality before, did not help us. It helped us in certain circumstances, but the circumstance where we're looking to work on ourselves now, it was not helping us in. So now we're going to change our focus from I'm working on myself in this specific way to what's my new way of life? How am I going to learn to live? Coping mechanisms versus survival skills. So coping mechanisms is healthy tools that help us to cope with challenging emotions. When emotions come up for us, we all have a tendency to run and push them under the rug so that way we don't have to feel them. Essentially, numbing. Numbing is the word, so that we don't need to feel the emotions. And then it's another act of surviving. That's a survival skill. When we can go quickly into numbness, whether it's through drugs, through alcohol, or maybe just distracting ourselves with cleaning up the house. It could even be reading, could be going on Facebook, YouTube, and just kind of like draining ourselves for the specific purpose of distracting ourselves and numbing ourselves from painful or challenging emotions. There's nothing wrong with Facebook and Instagram. I just want to put that out there. It's not about what you're using. It's about the purpose behind the behavior. If the purpose is to numb, then it's a survival skill. So when we're looking at coping mechanisms, what's really challenging about it is that we're going to have to live in a place of acceptance and accept reality on reality's terms and stop shoving our emotions under the rug so that we can really apply the coping mechanisms. So let me give an example of what that would look like. If we're in a place of acceptance and an emotion comes up, we have to accept that emotion now. Let's say it's grief, deep, deep, deep sadness, which is often the first intense emotion to come up after not accepting how you feel for a while and not letting yourself experience the feeling and let it flow through you. So that grief has come up and we don't know what to do. Our instinct is numb. And it'll probably happen even if we're putting effort towards not numbing because that's what we're used to. And our brain has created neural pathways that are telling us to numb again, because every time we do a behavior, our brain creates a neural pathway or it will strengthen a neural pathway that already exists. And it's going to give us the, It's going to basically help us to continue in that behavior, for good or for worse. So what we are doing when we're using coping mechanisms and learning how to use them, what it's going to be is kind of an intervention with ourselves. We learn a skill, and then the beginning is the hardest part because that's when you're really starting to live a new way of life with coping mechanisms instead of survival skills. And we're going to insert that skill to help us cope with the feeling. An example of that skill could be going for a walk, it could be calling a friend, it could be anything that gives you connection, support, or just meditating to allow yourself to experience it and get more experience feeling your emotions and being in a safe place and getting more acquainted with who you are and who is the real me, instead of mistaking myself for who I'm not. We're going to learn who we really are. Welcome, welcome. Feel free to find a seat. There's tea over there if you guys want. And we're ready for the next slide. That's okay. We have enough space for everybody? Oh, there are actually.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure if you like.
What does using coping mechanisms practically look like? So I just began to speak about that a little bit in the last slide, because that's naturally the next step now that we know the difference. I put this picture here, so that's kind of what it feels like. Because you're like puffed, like blowing out air. It's like this uncomfortable. And this, by the way, I'm talking about when you begin to be in a place of acceptance. And this is before even using the coping skills, the coping mechanisms. It's when we begin to accept the emotions are coming up, we're either triggered or just experiencing something that's generally emotional. And we don't like these emotions. If it's happiness, if it's joy, we all like that. So that's not so challenging. It's challenging when we're feeling grief, when we're feeling fear, we're feeling despair, when we're feeling desperate. And it's important to take deep breaths. That's also why I like this, because it's like, okay, what do I do? Like, it's like going crazy. You might even have physical symptoms. You might even be sweating, depending on for how long and how much the intensity of the trauma, the feelings that have been shoved under the rug have been. And we're gonna now, in this midst of this right here, we're gonna maybe call a friend, maybe go for a walk. Maybe if we're working and we think we have to continue working to feel good, take a break from work and say, you know what? I'm going to just take time with myself now and do something that I can enjoy. Now, from my experience with my clients, when we're in this state over here, it's kind of hard to enjoy yourself. There's nothing you really enjoy. You just feel really horrible and like crap, and you just want someone to make it better or to do something that's going to make it instantly better. And a good coping mechanism is going to be really connection. Finding other people that you can share this experience with, to be vulnerable with, who will fully understand you and fully accept you for everything that you are. Crafting a new way of life, using tools and living into our values. Can somebody read this quote down here?
A value is a way of being or believing that we know most important.
Yes, I love it. So our values are so important. Our values are what's going to really give the direction for our new way of life that we're going to be living into. And the tools that we're going to be using are the tools that we use as coping mechanisms in place of the survival skills. Okay, I have this amazing Brené Brown quote. Who wants to read it? Thank you, Brian.
Living into our values means that we do more than profess our values in practice. We walk our talk. We're clear about what we believe, and most importantly, and we take care that our intentions, words, thoughts, and behaviors align.
Thanks, Brian. What I love about this quote here from Brené Brown, and there's more to come, by the way, so don't worry, is that we really need to take so much care of our words, our thoughts, our intentions. Oftentimes, when we're in that place of survival mode, we're not so conscious. What happens is if we're in the throes of survival mode, our frontal lobe, which is over here, will shut itself off. And then we go into our middle brain, which is processing all the emotion, and we can't think logically because the logical part of our brain has shut itself off. And we're in this highly emotional state. And that's what really survival mode looks like when you're looking at the brain. So when we're in that state of our brain, we're not looking at our intentions, we're not thinking about our words, and we're definitely not focused on our thoughts. We're focused on survive. And that's why acceptance is so important, because when we can take a step back and just sit with ourselves and let this process flow through us until our frontal lobe, the logic center, can turn itself back on, then we'll be able to access what are my intentions? Which words should I use? How am I going to speak to people? what are my thoughts? When we can leverage our intentions, words, and thoughts and our behaviors, we're going to be in alignment with ourselves. Hopefully, only if we're being true with ourselves. We can be clear with our intentions and not necessarily be true to ourselves. We can use words that are nice and not attacking and not be true to ourselves. So it's also important to be true to ourselves in this process. And that's the beginning of changing the patterns of behavior that are causing us stress. And to pull it together, the patterns of behavior that are causing us stress is the survival behaviors. Now we're going to learn new behaviors in a new way of accessing our frontal lobe, which is going to be our words, thoughts, and intentions. Okay, another amazing, amazing excerpt from Brene Brown. Can I have someone volunteer to read it? Yeah? Okay. Yep.
The arena, particularly during dark and hard moments, we're trying to be really great. And overwhelmed. Distraction and noise around the blinking exit sign comes with the immediate shame and discomfort. And the cynics and the skeptics. Those have matches when the critics are being extra loud or rowdy, it's easy to start messing. To try to prove, perfect, form, and taste. God knows these are my 4 big P's. We can either hustle to show the crowd that we deserve to be there, or we can let them scare us off. Either way, it's easy to let them get in our heads and hide our
Thanks. I appreciate it.
100%.
Yeah. So this here is an arena. So who here likes sports? I know you do. And Brian does too. Yeah, of course Brian does.
Personal experience.
Yeah. Right. When there's a crowd looking, you play differently. Exactly. And oftentimes in the crowd, we have all those critics that are going to be telling us who to be, you're not good enough, you didn't do it right. And this is really kind of what we're walking into in life. We're in this arena. We're walking around, we're going to school, going to work, we're living with roommates, we have families, and there's all these people around us giving us feedback that is giving us negative messages that are really disconnecting us, one, from ourselves, and two, from them. They're disconnecting us from ourselves by telling us that we're not good enough or we're not deserving of something. And also the relationship, because how are you going to connect with somebody who's not seeing you for who you are? They're teaching you not to be accepting of yourself without even realizing it. They intended well, but what happens in reality is that, again, it's that survival behavior of thinking I'm not good enough, I have to try harder to be good enough to please this person. So these are all the critics. They're all around in the arena, and then we are there in the middle. And there's so many distractions and so many things that are going to take us away from our purpose, from the direction we want to go, and from the values we want to be living by. And all of this feedback really, really, really does distract us. And we look for that blinking red exit sign, just like Brene Brown said, that blinking sign that's going to be our quick escape. Okay, you guys know what's coming up next, right? Who wants to read? You ready? Who said that? Okay.
In those moments when we start putting other voices in front of our own, we forget what made us go into the arena. We forget our values. More frequently, we don't even know what they are or how to make them. If we do not have clarity of values, if we don't have anywhere else to look for focus, we don't have that light out to remind us why we're there. Cynics and the critics can bring us to our knees. More often than not, our values are what lead us to the arena door. We're willing to do something uncomfortable and daring because of our beliefs. And when we get in there and stumble or fall, we need our values to remind us why we went in, especially when we are face down for the dust and sweat and blood.
Thank you, Nicole, for being so excited to read it. When we live into our values, it's very vulnerable because we're going to be making choices to do things that is not going to please everybody. And when people see what we're choosing, our way of life, or whatever it is that we're choosing to do, they may give us feedback that is going to be hurtful to us. They may give us feedback that is going to give the message we're not good enough for something. And that's what puts us into the arena to begin with, by putting ourselves out there, by leaning into our values, by living into our values. There we are. We are in the arena, and you have a full audience all around you. And when that audience is going to be giving you those negative messages, we often forget our values. And it's kind of ironic because our values got us there to begin with. But now we put ourselves out there, we tried, and then we got knocked down because that's the reality is when we are in the arena, there are going to be people watching the show. We can't live into values we cannot name. What's very important about this is a lot of people will say they have values, but practically speaking, what are your top 2 values? Does anybody here know off the top of their head? No. Okay. What do you define values as?
My value is myself, being into and feeling like alive. Well,
Okay, awesome, very cool. So you're going to see in the next slide, I have a whole list of values. So you'll get to see.
there's so many feelings.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying is top 2 values. It's where we put our focus. It's so important to be able to name the values we're living into. So when we're practicing living into our values, it's a practical, down-to-earth experience of, okay, I'm feeling down. What can I do to lift myself up? I'm going to live into my values. What value? Next slide. Is it clear? Yep. Yeah. It's a long list. So is this clear? Can everybody see it?
You project yourself.
A new projector. Follow this one.
You might be able to show it.
It's okay. We'll work with what we got. Yeah, I'm going to read it out loud. So for this part, I'm going to take a wild chance here and say you may want to bring your phones out to take notes in without managing. Yeah, so if anybody wants paper, you can go to the hall. And I wanted to take, we'll take like a 2-3 minutes here. Really think about what are your top 2 values. I'm going to read this list off here and stuff, and then you can also just jot down a whole bunch if a bunch jump out at you. When I did this exercise myself, I started off with, I think, 15 of them, and then slowly took them down to just 2. I'm going to go over here. We have.
So it's true to this whole entire list?
Yeah. Here's my credits. You could, if your value is not here, then you can also, add your own. The first one is accountability, achievement, adaptability, adventure, altruism, ambition, authenticity, balance, beauty, being the best. I can't really read from here. Can you read them, Nicole?
Belonging, career, caring, collaboration, commitment, community, compassion, competence, confidence, connection, contentment, contribution, cooperation, courage, creativity, dignity, diversity, environment, efficiency, equality, ethics, excellence, fairness, faith, family, financial stability, forgiveness, freedom, friendship, fun, intergenerations, generosity, giving back, grace, gratitude, growth, harmony, health, home, honesty, hope, humility, humor, inclusion, independence, integrity, initiative, intuition, job security, joy, justice, kindness, knowledge, leadership, learning, legacy, leisure, love, loyalty, making a difference, openness, optimism, order, nature, parenting, patriotism, patience, peace, perseverance, personal fulfillment, power, pride, recognition, reliability, respect, resourcefulness, responsibility, risk-taking, safety, security, self-discipline, self-expression, self-respect, serenity, service, simplicity, spirituality, sportsmanship, stewardship, success, time, teamwork, thrift, tradition, travel, trust, truth, understanding, uniqueness, usefulness, vision, vulnerability, wealth, well-being, wholeheartedness, wisdom. Where do you go?
There's 2 blanks that if you have another value that wasn't listed in all of these, right here. in about another minute here. Really take this time to think about it while we're here in this setting.
You have a copy of this one?
Yeah, I can post a copy of this in the Facebook. The event, yeah. Keep calling it a group. Nicole keeps correcting me.
Why two?
Because it's a lot. Grade 2 is a lot to focus on daily. What we're talking about is finding 2 values to focus on this daily basis. And then in the next slide, I'm gonna talk about how to do that. So it's not that you can't do 3, and if you want to, you're welcome to. But 2, it's it's a lot to focus on. Oh, yeah. Yeah. All right, does anybody want more time to think about their values? Is nobody screaming, yes, wait for me? I'm going to go to the next one. Let me call whenever you're ready to change the slides. Thank you. Our values should be so crystallized in our mind that they don't feel like a choice. Ever heard, I didn't choose the thug life chose me? That's how you should feel about your values. Their definition of who we are in our lives. In those hard moments, we are going to choose what's right now over what's fast and easy. But why, you may ask? Why would we want to choose what's right over what's fast and easy? Why would we choose to live into our values? Because of our integrity. Integrity is choosing courage over comfort. Integrity plays a huge, huge role in choosing to live into our values. When we begin to live into our values, especially when we're recovering from survival techniques, survival skills that we've developed within ourselves, it's very hard to have integrity sometimes. Now, this isn't 100 or 0%. It's in that specific area that we had used a survival skill that we may have lacked integrity. Maybe it's a white lie, maybe it's being a little bit manipulative and we know we're not being so straightforward. Maybe it's a straight out lie and we're being dishonest with somebody so that they don't dislike us, we don't lose a friend, we don't lose a job, whatever it is. And if living into our values is going to compromise it's not compromising actually, it's gonna make us vulnerable. It makes us vulnerable to perhaps losing a job if we're going to be honest with who we are, or our perception of who we are. If we're still working on thinking more of ourselves and show ourselves, is this person going to accept me? Are they really going to like who I actually am? We have to really live by our integrity, and the integrity to stand by our values. And that's really choosing courage over comfort. Sure.
I noticed that you may specify the values of this. People are taking a negative and positive context. Because some people's value is success. They do anything for success. They will lie, cheat, steal, murder, for everything.
Right.
That's why one value success.
Right.
So part of people towards values of the link or is it the positive side of value? Success, yes, but
Right. So by saying there's a negative and a positive side to a value is actually judging. Is this good or is this bad? What we're looking at is, this is the value. How are we getting our needs met? How are we reaching this value? Are we lying, cheating, stealing? Or are we choosing integrity to happen? Yeah. And I'll just give you a quick recap. I was talking about survival skills and changing survival skills into coping mechanisms. So a survival skill would be cheating to have success. Coping would be, I'm feeling lots of anxiety right now, so I'm going to call a friend and tell her what's going on and build connection. And from that place of connection, my anxiety will then lower, and also accepting myself and having another person accept me, then I can take honest and integral actions towards success. Now, step 2. Let's see if I can read it. What are 3 behaviors that support your value? So write that down. That's the first part, is 3 behaviors that support your value. If it's easier for you to focus on one value at a time, I definitely don't multitask. So behavior is an action you can take that will be living into the value. So for example, let's say freedom is somebody's value. An act of freedom is I focus on acceptance on a daily basis, because acceptance will lead me to freedom. Okay, and the next question is, what are 3 slippery behaviors that are outside your value? These are the things that we do that are the slippery behaviors that we have tendencies towards. They're a bit easier to do and is outside of our value.
Outside of our value, we're ignoring our
Exactly. When we're living into our value, we're taking action that supports and strengthens our value. And then outside of the value would be things that literally disconnect us from the value, that are not connected to the value. But it's sad for us. Like, you can do things that are not connected to your value that are just not related, but these are a slippery slope away from the specific value.
How, like, it's not one, like 2 values for the rest of your life.
Right. You know, I'm in the middle of thinking about this question, and I've been thinking about it for like a year or so now. I think about things for a long time. But what I've come to understand is,
value.
yeah, right? At this point, I think that there's 2 core values that, like the thug life chose me. These core values, it's your soul. It's something that doesn't change. Our bodies change, our personalities change. You know?
You can rewire your subconscious mind and then like change like everything. So like depends how much work you do or not.
Right. So your brain is a part of your physical body, but your soul is eternal. I think the values are connected with our soul. When we rewire our brain and get to a better place mentally, living a more positive, thought-based life, and not leaning into fears and leaning into courage and believing in ourselves, it's connecting with our soul. Before, we were not in alignment with who we really are in our soul. And that's what you're describing as the process of becoming in true alignment with ourselves. We can't know our true values if we don't know our real self.
You just have to your whole life.
Yeah, you have more, for sure. But I'm saying top 2. Because it gives direction. When you focus on everything, you're focusing on nothing.
But I think if for example, I focus on 2 things for like 5 months, then it's building a habit. It's building something that kind of is more ingrained in me, and then I can want another 2 that are more important for me.
Yeah.
Keeping the other 2, which is those habits, and then going back to that there's something along the way that kind of glitches.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So tell me if I'm understanding you properly. What I'm understanding is that you're seeing it as something to accomplish, where I accomplished these values, now I'm going to work on other values, but created that habit by focusing on it for 5 minutes.
No, it's like focusing on those habits, that on those values, because you can have values and not, fulfill them. You can have values and not be living them. Yeah, like you said, so it's focusing on them, it becomes a habit once you focus on it. Right. And then you can move on to other things. Because I don't think that focusing on two values, like after a while, like you need balance. Like if you're focusing just on compassion and intuition, those are very two similar things. And then I'm focusing on balance. Then I have to need community. And then you need other things. Definitely. And those are just as important to focus on. But because you can't focus on more than two things, which I find to be true, then I'm saying, like, maybe that's, I don't know, like maybe that's something that people learn that you can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So I'll tell you for myself, one of my values is freedom. And when I tell that to people, I've gotten a lot of backlash about it. What do you mean, freedom? And I explain, no, freedom means acceptance. People automatically assume it means that you want to run away. For me, being free, it means, a friend of mine recently was saying, no, your value is truth. What do you mean it's freedom? I said, no. I said, I like truthhood because when I'm living a life of truth, then I feel free. But everything for me, but all the other values that would have been on the list, I could have checked off at least half of that list, if not more, for myself. But there's two core values that all the other values lead into. For me, the question is, what's the end point? Why I like truth, I like adventure. What does adventure give me? Adventure gives me this value. What does this give me? And eventually it gets back to two core values.
So they could just also be similar to each other and then you just kind of mesh that together.
Yeah.
Okay, so I wouldn't choose like intuition and passion because they're so similar. I would choose like to balance each other out. Like they're different from each other. They're very different because for me to focus on two very similar things, but in your case.
Well, it has to feel right to you, No, that's okay. Yeah, it has to feel right to you. That's all. There's no right, there's no wrong.
I don't want to make so much of a choice. Looking at this, also, I want to be that, I want to be that. I think it's something that's very else when we're kids. And then everything else in life, when we try to do things, the ways, these are positive values that we'll have to incorporate into our essence, who we are.
Yeah.
So when you're asking what it talks about, somebody really, when you wish to aspire, it's like, you strip everything away, who are you really?
Right.
Who's really aspires like? That's what it is.
Right. Definitely. Yeah, it's true. And it's funny that you're putting in that light, because I never asked, what do you aspire to be? I said, what are they?
I just tell people when you're like, if you move on, I want to be that, focus on it. I don't really think you have a choice. I think you have to just learn who you really are, very valuable, and maybe incorporate all this other stuff. Like those values.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. No, you're speaking words of truth. Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly it. And people's minds often tend to go, oh, which ones do I want to be? Instead of which ones am I? And yeah, no, it's a very, very good point. Did anybody else? Great. Oh, okay, go back. So guys, Pete, there we go. Okay. Pete and repeat run a vote. Pete fell off. Who was left? Repeat. So everything, we're not going to do this right now, but everything you did with the first value, you're going to repeat for the second one. That's it. Yeah, you go to the next slide. Empathy and self-compassion is the third step, the two most important seats in the arena. We're back in the arena, guys. We got here because we leaned into our values and we were vulnerable enough to take action towards those values of ours. And one of the critics is making comments to us. What do we do? Empathy and self-compassion. Now, this, from my experience with my clients, is one of the hardest things for people to understand. It's something that if we weren't given empathy and compassion as children or adolescents, it's very hard to really learn how to give ourselves empathy and compassion. Where this often comes in is when we're triggered by something and we're in the midst of thinking we're not good enough, and that's what we're telling ourselves. I'm not good enough, I'm not deserving of this, and we're not being empathetic to ourselves, and we're not being compassionate to ourselves. The way to talk to ourselves that's going to give us the freedom and connection with ourselves that we're looking for is by giving ourselves empathy. You've been through a lot in your life, owning your story, saying you've been through a lot in your life, and it's not your fault that you're here. This is just what happened. It was out of your control, and you're trying the best that you can. And that would be a line of empathy. And also self-compassion. And it's when those beliefs come into our brains that we're not good enough for something, or we have to try harder to impress somebody, to earn their love, to earn their trust, whatever it is, to get connection from somebody. What?
That is like called codependency.
Yes. Yeah.
Also,
Sure. Yeah.
I've heard like many times these like beliefs that we have, they're not even from us. It's from like people like around us growing up who like said different mean things to us, and then because your like brain records that, it just stays there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's not even 50%.
Yeah. Definitely. For sure. Yeah. And that's exactly what I was saying before about your question is there's the difference between who we are and that we often mistake these negative thoughts for who we are, and that it's just things we've heard, but it's not our soul, it's not who we are. And that's why self-compassion is so important, because it has the power to get us out of that negative place and into the positive place.
What if it really is your fault and it's not trying? You know you've done this, you know you've loved to have you do certain behavior, time again. You do it anyway now you're in that situation. And it's really hard, trying very hard to get out of it. It's just supposed to like have passion and like to what extent, like you just press the button and say, oh, it's not my fault, I want this way, like oh maybe like this, and like and what how much is self-responsibility that you are doing in your negative situation?
That's an amazing question, and that could have a whole like hour class on the answer. But I'll give a short answer like this. A question that I often ask people is, do you think people are trying their best? And more than 50% of the people I ask will say people are not trying their best. I believe people are all trying their best. Everyone has different tools and skills that some people just have bad body awareness and maybe they're spilling coffee over, like when they don't mean they made their morning coffee and then, were they trying their best? If they just had no idea the coffee was there, to someone else who might be very perfectionistic and knows and is very organized, knows exactly where everything is, doesn't like a mess, they would say that person really wasn't thinking about the cup of coffee. But was that even in that person's like orbit to make, So everybody has different skill sets, everybody has different tools, and for what we have, I personally believe everybody is trying their best. It's a matter of looking at where the person is going from. That's what you don't believe you're trying.
I know I am not trying my best. Not even close. Like not maybe 30%. Is that a good day? Like it's like.
Not wrong.
Right.
No, what I'm saying.
Even like bullies are also trying their best. I don't think so.
Certain people just they know this shit. Like so is the thief. Like, you're not supposed to steal something. He just doesn't care.
Adult.
It's not his. Like you shouldn't like.
What if the thief is a sociopath?
Okay, but then there's no help for him. Like yeah.
What I'm saying is that's him
I
at his
try to
best.
imagine I'm not a sociopath. Like most people are sociopaths.
It's also like maybe not necessarily not doing something, but like, or maybe not doing something, but maybe not living up to one's potential, like recognizing that that's the case, or like engaging in behavior that's like kind of like counter
to what they know they actually have tremendous potential to
It
achieve.
could be either, yes, that's what I'm asking. The person, just as stupid as that, a person could be an Olympic athlete. He knows that he's very good, but he eats potato chips and does this and doesn't work out, and he ends up like sitting on the couch playing video games and like,
It's self-sabotage.
or he just doesn't care enough to like. This person knows that they're capable of a lot, and they might even want that. They probably do want it, but for whatever reason, they just don't.
They don't
Yes.
self-sabotage, like
Yeah.
say like, for whatever reason, but some people are just stuck in this pattern. And so they're doing their best to move the place that they're not being stuck. Like, yeah, it's like, okay, you make decisions, but then there's the self-sabotage, and it's like rooting childhood, and feeling like you're not good enough, and whatever it is. So they're doing their best with the, like, prison they have themselves in because they're pattern and that's like constantly pattern. It's like you're stuck in self-sabotage.
Yes, the question is, how much harder is the average person going to try? That's basically the question.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer for that.
That's the question that we see this. I don't know if why is there a science or there is a knowledge that we feel like we have this value, we have to stick to it? Where is it said that? Meaning, is there like something that's pushing people to like, oh, this is who I am, and I have this. This defines me. If I don't do it, I'm nothing.
That would be a belief system, if it's a negative belief or a positive belief around your values and the values that you
Yeah,
connect
because
with.
the scenario said, look at the Dave had value in the hit, you look at that. He's reached it, he has to maintain it.
Right.
But his drive to maintain it is not as great as his value was to be able to have it.
Right. So, right, things like, how does that all play out?
Are we like locked in, like, that's it, once I show this value, so I am?
We're never a slave to our values. Our values should give us freedom to feel good. I would question, Fauci, if in your example you said the person sitting on the couch eating potato chips, right? And what did you say he wanted to do?
You can do anything. You want to be a PhD,
You want to be a
instead of, I don't, take examples, random examples, and a person instead of, they
A
doesn't study,
PhD
doesn't go
was
to
in the
school.
Olympics.
No, it's a different, it can be anything. I want to open a business, I'm open a business, I'm playing basketball instead, whatever. It doesn't matter what the example is, it's just a person
Right.
knows he wants to do something, he knows he's capable of something, or bad behaviors too. Person
There's
is
a
angry,
difference
person
between
is-
logically knowing you're capable and truly believing with all of your being that you can succeed in it. If a person, now, sometimes people think they believe in themselves, but they don't. There's a lot of people who think they believe in themselves, but they're not acting on it. And there's something very deeply rooted, I found, and a lot of people that I've worked with, where when you unpeel the layers of the onion, you get to the core, they don't really believe that they can. And that's really what that is. When the person is able to get to that place where they can say, wow, I don't believe I can do this, I want to, logically, I should be able to, then when they're able to share that with another human being and connect and give themselves compassion, or, wow, I went through so much in my life, whatever it is, this was my story, and because this is my story, it has led me today to not believe I can really do this, and I want to do it, and I want other people to think that I can do it, so I'm telling myself that I can, and that's what's keeping me afloat, but they're not taking the action. And then through connection, through accepting where they are, what they truly believe, is what's going to help them to begin making those steps forward.
Yeah, I agree with the connection that it's like, I'm thinking of like my brother, for example, who like everyone in my family sees that he has like he's brilliant, like he has such potential to do things. And I think so much of it is who you like, it's kind of cliche, but like who you surround yourself with. It's like if you're around people who are like, yeah, like dude, like of course you can do this, like let's figure out how to make it happen. Like they like give you a certain energy that like other people may like bog you down and be like, yeah, it doesn't matter, like, whatever, but like, communicating your dreams, like collaborating with people, like how do we get out of it?
Yeah.
It's like, like want that for other people.
Are there any more questions? Your support support system starts here. You want someone to read this?
The support system starts with who's someone who knows your values, supports your efforts to live. What's support? This person? What does support in this person look like? Who can you do what is an act of self-compassion? Support yourself in the hard work, living in your values. And what are the really worthy signs of living outside your values? What does it feel like when you're living into your values? How does living in your true values shape the way you do?
So if you guys want to write these questions down, this is a really good set of questions to check in with yourself and see where you're holding with building your support system and leaning into your values.
I don't get what these questions do.
So I'll start with the first one. Who is someone who knows your values and supports your efforts to live into them? When we have a clear understanding of who those people are in our life, then we know this is a person that I can call or connect with. It's about building connection and leaning into our values, because when we're not leaning into our values, like we'll reach out to anybody and connect with anyone. I'm sure they're all good and wonderful people, but once we take a step towards narrowing our life into a specific direction instead of every direction, which every direction is no direction, right? And then in a direct direction, you're going somewhere. So it's about connecting with those people that are going to be along the path with you that share values.
You mean only when you're going into parts that are like places.
Oh, no, for everything. For everything. Somebody who you share values with, you know, I would recommend that they are accepting of you and understanding of you.
You can't like always like you need this a lot. Like people fool you. These things fool you. So
I think if
it's
there's,
like very hard to see.
I think if there's someone, like family a lot of times comes to this,
Yeah.
one of the reasons why when you don't have support family, make your life so much better. But yeah, but I would say that a lot of the time for you, if you like a lot of times, sometimes like childhood friends have like some values you or people you meet along the road, you like go, oh, like we talk a lot about similar things and share some values. And then you kind of hold each other accountable. Like you call like, oh my god, this thing, like there's this thing I'm dealing with right now, and like talk to them about it, and they would deal with it the same way you would hope to. So you guys kind of like bounce off of each other and support each other in everything. We also won't judge you for like saying, oh, you know, I did this thing today, whatever, and they'll kind of give you advice based on your values. Like that's how I. It's not. I think it's a hard thing. It's like not like
Yeah.
It's not like something that one has. It's just kind of like.
Understanding that everybody has.
Like not everyone is. That's like not like that. If you have that, that's like don't block that out. But it's not like it's not everyone has that. Like
Right.
if you have that, you're really lucky. And like it's amazing and it's very helpful. But like you don't find that right away.